This week on Flashback Fridays, I'm going to head back to the Star Wars universe and that 12-inch action figure range from Kenner. And this week, it's a bit of a double whammy because you can't split up a pair, so I'm doing C-3PO and R2-D2. Both of these figures are slightly unique in the line for different reasons. First off, of course, you're going to notice there is a slight scaling difference between these two characters, but also the way they're made and the challenges associated with these particular characters make these figures both quite unique and individual in this line. So let's start with the C-3PO. As you can see, he comes in the standard 12-inch action figure line packaging. It is quite a long, thin, narrow box, and we have an image there on the front of a production still of the character itself as opposed to the figure, which is quite nice. This is like a nice folding flap that opens up, and we'll have a look at that in a moment. But behind him, we have an image, of course, of the Death Star. We have this magnificent star field, and we have some TIE fighters as well, which is all pretty fun and colourful and really helps the image of C-3PO really stand out, especially because he's so gold and vibrant and bright. Now this is pretty standard for these early releases in this line. It's very attractive packaging. I think it still looks very good and very presentable even to this day. Now one of the peculiarities of this line from Kenner is that some of these figures would have the gold sticker, this gold embossed sticker, as you can see on the bottom of the packaging here. In this case, it's the Rebel Alliance logo. Figures that represented the Empire would have the Empire logo instead. Not all of these figures had this embossed sticker. Some did, some didn't, and it seems to be luck of the draw on which ones got it. But nevertheless, this is a really nice added touch. I remember looking at this as a kid and being quite mesmerised by this gold sticker on there and thinking it was some kind of seal of quality. But it's very, very nice and very attractive. When we look at the side panel, of course, we can see this is quite a thin, narrow panel. Again, we have what's replicated on the front of the packaging, this image of C-3PO here, the starfield behind him, and of course, the various logos associated with the film. On the reverse of the packaging, we have a little bit of bio about Star Wars, and we have some other figures that are available in this line. We can see the TIE Fighter pilot, Admiral Akbar, Chewbacca, who I've already looked at in this series, R2-D2, and Yoda as well. And when we open up that gatefold flap at the front of the packaging, we can see that on the interior flap we have a little bit more bio about the character, another production still from, I think that's Return of the Jedi. But regardless, this looks really nice, very presentable, it's very collector friendly, and is a very nice approach. Of course, on the right hand side we can see that window packaging there of C-3PO in all his glory. Now, obviously, when you open this figure, the first thing you are going to be struck by is the fact that they have opted for the chrome paint on C-3PO, and I think this works an absolute treat. I've always loved chrome on my action figures, and I know there's a lot of debate about the longevity of this approach when it comes to creating these metallic figures, but I absolutely adore it. I think it looks so, so good. Needless to say, you can see your reflection in this figure. He's so bright and catches the light incredibly well. It is like looking in a mirror. It's absolutely tremendous how reflective and bright and colourful this figure is, and it just looks absolutely gorgeous. I really, really love this figure, and I think it is purely for the chrome. If this had been any kind of matte, then it would not be half as impressive as it is. I think this looks visually amazing on display. I think the sculpting is also really, really nice as well. I think they've done a really good job of accurately recreating those proportions on C-3PO here, and this all looks really solid stuff. As we can see, there's actually plenty of detail in this sculpt all over the torso. Every rivet and nut and bolt and all those individual lines are very meticulously sculpted here. I think this looks absolutely tremendous. I think they've done a really good job, especially for the time, because we're talking about the sort of mid to late 90s when this figure was produced, and I think they've done a really nice job of this, and of course it is all capped in that chrome. In his midriff area we can see a bit more colour here. We can see some of those wires. We can see lots of red and green and silver against that sort of black background, and I think it looks really good. Helps this figure to really pop, and I just think it looks really, really nice. One of the cool things about this figure as well is that even on the palms of the hands we have a little bit more detail there. We have the black of sort of the glove underneath, and then we have some of those individual golden pieces as well, which looks really, really good. So I think the overall presentation of this figure is second to none in this line. It's really beautifully done. And that continues all the way down the figure, right through the legs and even into the feet. We can see an awful lot of detail, which is absolutely fantastic. Where this figure falls short, however, is in the articulation scheme. He does have a swivel at the head, so his head can spin 360 degrees, which is pretty standard for this line. He has a swivel at the shoulder. It's not a ball joint, so those arms do just lift up and down, and that's pretty much it. There is no articulation in the elbows or in the wrists or anywhere else. There is a ball joint in his midriff, in that waist area. There's not a huge range of motion. It is blocked by those golden hips. He can sort of turn from side to side, and he can kind of bend forwards and backwards, but not very much to be practical. He has another swivel at the hip, but because these are kind of diagonal, the legs kind of point out a very awkward, strange angle. He does have a single joint at the knee, though, that does allow the leg to bend to almost 90 degrees, and there is a hinge on the foot, which allows the foot to hinge forwards and backwards. So this figure kind of represents highs and lows for the line, really. Highs in terms of the overall presentation, which is, I do believe is second to none. I think it's one of the finest in the line. I love the chrome paint, and I know that this does divide fans and even manufacturers when it comes to this approach, because of course, you know, there is a tendency for them to flake over time or to kind of fade and not look so good. But mine's lasted a good 30 years almost at this stage, or approaching that, and he still looks as good today as he did when I was first opened him up. So I think, you know, if you look after them correctly, then they can last a long time, and they look absolutely fantastic. So in terms of presentation, yeah, absolutely brilliant. I think where he falls down obviously is on the articulation. There's very little to begin with, and what is there is almost useless, to be honest. So he's not one you're going to be able to do a lot of posing with, but then he's not a character that is known for breaking out lots of different shapes. So let's move on now to the R2-D2, and of course when we're looking at this packaging, this is much smaller packaging. This is a tiny little box, and you'll notice there is no gatefold flap. It is just open window display with the figure inside there, and there's no embossed sticker of the Rebellion either, so it's a little bit more plain. There's no colourful images of TIE fighters or the Death Star in that starfield. It is just a plain starfield, but it still looks fairly attractive. It's just much smaller and much more simple in design. On the side panel though, we do have this image of R2-D2, and this is quite chunky. This is a little bit thicker than we'd normally see for this line, which is quite cool. And on the reverse of the packaging, we have the other figures in this line. These are all the small figures in this line. Of course, we have the Jawa and Master Yoda as well. The figure himself is incredibly pleasing. As soon as you take him out of the packaging, you're going to notice that he's quite a solid, hefty figure, which is quite nice. There's a nice weight to him, even though he is just made of plastic, and his dimensions and overall presentation and look is pretty much spot on. I can't really fault anything about the sculpting. It's kind of difficult to talk about sculpt when we're talking about a droid, but hey, this looks really nice. I think they've done a good job. The colours are accurate, and it looks overall very nicely done. If I was going to be critical, I think I might have said, well, it might have been nice to maybe had the chrome effect on that silver plate in there, as we saw with C-3PO. That would have been really cool to have him really shine. And perhaps there was an opportunity here to make this an electronic figure. It would have been really cool if he made some electronic sounds, you know, his familiar bleeps and whoops would have been quite cool. And maybe even an opportunity to put a light in there, so that little red light could have perhaps lit up with a nice bright red light. That would have been really cool if there was a little button somewhere. That would have been quite fun. As it is, he doesn't have any of these features, but otherwise this is pretty solid stuff. The sculpting of the bodywork is pretty accurate. This looks really good to my eye. There's plenty of detail in here, and the paint apps are nicely applied. There's not an awful lot else they could have done with this, I don't think, unless they were doing a battle damaged version. That would have been kind of cool. But to be honest, this is the version I would have wanted, a nice clean brand new spanking R2-D2, and it looks really nice what we've got here. Now in terms of articulation, obviously there's not a whole lot you'd expect from R2-D2. His dome does swivel right the way around, as you would hope, which is pretty nice. And of course his arms also have a swivel as well, so those arms move forwards and backwards. There's a little catch that locks the arms into certain default positions, which recreate his look as he's travelling around. Now at the bottom of the legs, you'll notice there is this swivel here that allows the feet to move forwards and backwards as well, and that lock with the arms can be bypassed. You can slip the arms past that lock, so the arms can swivel all the way around if you want them to. He also has a third leg, just as he does in the films, that's hidden in his main body. You can pull this out, just slide this out here, and you'll see there is a third leg and third foot that is also on a hinge that allows you to position R2-D2 into travelling. You'll notice that on all 3 feet there are actually 2 2 plastic wheels that allow R2-D2 to travel forwards and backwards with the slightest push. And just like in the movies, he tends to travel in straight lines, but you can get him to move around comfortably. Overall, 2 very cool additions to this line, and hugely contrasting against each other, not just in height, but also in terms of the approach. As I've said, I've waxed quite lyrical about the C-3PO. I really love this chrome paint. I would have liked to see some of this chrome on R2-D2 actually, but they're both fantastic figures. Strangely enough, it looks like R2-D2 has the better articulation scheme and is probably more fun to play with as a kid. But nevertheless, I think these figures look really, really good together and are really fun to put on display. If you enjoyed this video, please do give it a like and remember to subscribe as there'll be plenty more videos soon.